Okay. Hello, everybody. Everybody who's watching now and perhaps in the future. So, before I really get going here, I want to say that I'm coming at you from Hong Kong right now, and the Wi-Fi hotel apartment is not what I would call strong. So, I hope everything goes fine, but we'll see. And also, I'm kind of low to the ground, so there may be some traffic noise here as well. And I also had to turn off the AC because it makes a terrible racket. So, given how humid Hong Kong is, this I probably could only make it 30 minutes without the aircon on. So, we'll try to go, and hopefully, the stream will go all right. So today, we're looking at a poem by John Donne, Satire 3. So this is going to be the first of a series on, um, I guess, poetry readings or something. All I'd like to do uh, some of these once in a while. So let's share this little screen here. Should be able to see this. Um, so this is what we're looking at. We're looking at Satire 3. So a little bit of background. John Donne is a poet who's roughly contemporary with Shakespeare, born around 1571, died in 1631. So lived a little bit longer, but we're talking about somebody from the Elizabethan era. Um, and he's he's kind of a bit underrated because it's just long enough as a poem that it's hard to do fit into a normal college course where it would usually be taught because you would have to spend basically an entire day on it. And usually in college courses, they have a lot of material they need to cover. They don't have time to spend a day on one poem like this. So it's not often taught, or not taught as often maybe as it should be. But it's a great poem and very interesting. And I think it's particularly interesting because it gives us some insight in how to about the normie mind. Um, Even though it's from 500 years ago, it still provides us a bit of insight into how we might want to think about the normie, an issue that uh, significant um, in the post-COVID era. We saw how normies responded to various attempts to contain the pandemic, resulted in a reassessment, let's say, of the normie mind. So when you take a look at this poem, uh, when you take a look at any poem, you really want to go from uh, focus on the beginning, what's going on right from the start, and let's just take a look at the first two lines, and we'll get a sense of what's going on. And actually, the first two lines of this poem do provide us interesting take. So, kind pity chokes my spleen. Ray scorn forbids these tears to issue, which swell my eyelids. Okay, so right away, we are in a poem that's going to be written in couplets, kind of heroic couplets, but not, not heroic couplets are iambic pentameter lines, meaning lines of about 10 syllables with an unstressed, stressed pattern with a perfect rhyme at the end. But at the very start, he's using actually a special kind actually called an isobaric rhyme, where that means that it's a rhyme where rhyme sound falls on on a non-stressed syllable. So in this case, the rhyme sound is bids and lids, right? But the word eyelids, the stress is on the first syllable. So for bid, eyelid. And when you have that kind of rhyme, it's a bit unsettling. And Donne does lots of things like this in the poem that actually the succeeding generation, the generation that came after him, and that's people like Jonathan Swift, Alexander Pope, John Dryden, Samuel Johnson, they found this kind of rhyme and this and the kind of rhythms that he uses, and they didn't like it to disrepute. And actually, it wasn't until really the 20th century that his reputation as a poet kind of emerged. And now let's take a look at the sense of it. And I think the sense of it is uh, it's a perfect encapsulation of how I think about the norm, meaning that they should be viewed with something of a mixture of pity and spleen. Spleen means anger. Using sort of Elizabethan humor psychology, the spleen was the root of your anger or bile. On the one hand, pity prevents him from being angry or bilious or splenetic towards people. But on the other hand, scorn doesn't let him weep. In other words, doesn't let him show his pity. He's somewhere between uh, pity and anger, or pity and bile. Uh, the normie is viewed with a mixture of pity and contempt, let's say. Not entirely too much to one side or the other, but somewhere in between those two things. And he goes on, I must not laugh, sins, and be wise. Can railing means complaint or invective, can railing then cure these worn maladies? Again, a rhyme that's kind of imperfect. Um, and then he's going to, in the next line, he creates the sort of conceit that goes through the poem, the conceit of religion as a woman, like our mistress. And he's talking about religion. This is a poem about religion, and this is why he's in this state, because uh, religion. And keep in mind, he's writing in this was written in the 1590s, and he's already saying these people have no religion. There's no religion. I can't imagine what he would say if he saw the state of England in 2023. Is not our mistress fair religion as worthy of all our soul's devotion as virtue was blinded age? Now, this idea of virtue in the first blinded age. So it was a popular way of conceiving the classical era, the era of Greece and Rome, as, first of all, it's a blinded age because it's pre-Christian, but they're also not. They have no sense of God, right? So not even the God as revealed to the Jews. They don't have a sense of that. They're pagans, as Donne and the other Elizabethans are well aware, and so they often characterize them as blinded because they don't have uh, the key insight into the true nature of the soul. But they grant them that they did have some conception of virtue because they appreciated the and Roman conception of public spiritedness and public facing virtue, and they thought their commitment to that was solid. They admired it, and so basically, what he's saying is, shouldn't we be as devoted to religion as these were devoted to? And then he goes on, are not heaven's joys as valiant to assuage lusts as earth's honor was to them? Alas, as we do them in means, shall they surpass us in the end? And shall thy Father's Spirit be blind philosophers in heaven, whose merit of strict life may be imputed faith, and hear thee, whom he taught so easy ways and near to follow, damned? So this is actually quite a bold conception. So imagine, is it going to be possible that your father will be saved and go to heaven, and he'll meet Simon, who God, out of his infinite mercy, will say, well, you didn't follow Christ, but I'm going to choose to have you saved because you at least a virtuous path that was correct enough, and yet uh, your father is going to see you who was taught the correct way, taught the correct faith, but you didn't follow it, and you're going to end up damned and in hell. It's quite a remarkable situation that he's imagining there. And he goes on, oh, if thou darest fear this fear and high valor is. So this is that's a paradox, that this fear is actually courageous. Donne is very famous for these kind of paradoxes, which is another thing that the generation of poets succeeding him just couldn't stand. They thought it was just irrational to a degree that they just found annoying. But he likes these kind of paradoxes. And there's a sense in which these paradoxes are kind of what you find. There's a biblical justification for them, you can say. The first shall be last, and the last shall be first, and so on. So this is not unknown in Christian thinking, for sure. But he says, so he says, this fear is actually high courage and high valor. And then he goes on to say, darest thou a mutinous Dutch? Mutinous Dutch meaning, the Dutch, the Netherlands was under the control of the Spanish, and British mutinous Dutch in their rebellion against that, because at the Dutch as co-religionists, they were Protestants like themselves, and admired their religion. They were closer to them in language, and I would say they also seem to think of them as closer ethnically, and so they supported the Dutch in their. So he's basically saying, look, you dare feed these people, and there's thee in wooden sepulchres. Go out at sea. So the British even at this time had a famous navy, not so much militarily, but their merchant marines. So darest thou lay thee in ships, wooden sepulchres, a prey to leaders' rage, to storms, to shot, to dearth? Darest thou die seas and dungeons of the earth? Hast thou courageous fire to thaw the ice of frozen north discoveries, and thrice colder than salamanders, like divine children in the oven, fires of Spain in the line, whose country's limbics to our bodies be? Canst thou for gain bear? So can you do these things? Can you, just to gain some profit in this world, bear all this pain? And must every he which cries not goddess to thy mistress draw or eat thy poisonous words? So this is a reference to this conception of the time, that you would praise some woman that you were in love with, and other men like, oh yes, she's definitely a goddess. And if they don't say that, then you challenge them to a duel or some nonsense. This is just pure nonsense in his view. Every he who cries not goddess to thy mistress, draw or eat thy poisonous words. Courage of straw. O desperate coward, wilt thou seem bold, and to thy foes and his, who made thee to stand sentinel in his world's garrison, thus yield, and for forbidden word leave the appointed field? Okay, so what is he referring to here? Thy foes and his. Now, his means God. Thy foes and his, mean the foes of you and his, God, who made you to stand in his world's garrison. Will you yield, and for forbidden wars, meaning to fight wars that you shouldn't, leave the appointed field, meaning the field that you are appointed to fight in? And you are appointed to fight. And what are the classic foes? This is from the medieval era onward, exception of your foes are three, the three classic foes of Christian thought: the world, the flesh, and the devil. Okay. And that's what he goes on to talk about. So know thy foes: the foul devil, whom thou strivest to please, for hate, not love, would allow thee fain this whole realm to be quit. I.e., the devil rules this world, right? And he would to escape his pain, he'd gladly give it all to you. He doesn't have any problem giving it all to you. And so that's the first one. And as the world's all parts wither away and pass, the world is the second foe, so the world's itself, thy other loved, is in her decrepit wing. And thou loving this, dost love a withered and worn strumpet. Strumpet is a whore. The world is likened to an old whore. Why is the world a work as an old whore? Because the world, as you can observe around you, time is always moving on, always moving forward. It's always aging. And so there's this sense of it doesn't stand fast, it doesn't endure, it doesn't last. Okay. And so last, flesh itself, which flesh can taste, thou lovest. And thy fair goodly soul, which give this flesh power to taste joy, thou dost loathe. Okay, so you love things, pleasant things of this world, beautiful music, great food, and sex, all these wonderful things. But the ability to enjoy those things comes from your soul that's within you. Because the soul goes away, your body doesn't have the power to enjoy those things on its own. So what he's saying is, uh, things gives you the power to enjoy those things, you loathe them. This is the situation. And so now here's the turn in the poem. The turn is, and what he's advising, an intellectual life that is compatible to the normie mind. He's speaking to ordinary men, right? And he's trying to encourage them to seek true religion. Okay. But the problem is, well, what is true religion? Because then, as now, there's many competing examples. And he gives several examples of men. And he gives them names, Nereus and Cramps and so forth. They represent different approaches to thinking about religion, thinking about different kinds of women that they would. So, so the first one is, okay, seek true religion. Oh, where? Boreas, thinking her unhoused here meaning like, let's say in England, and fled from us, seeked her at Rome. There, because he doth know that she was there 1,000 years ago. He loves her rags so, as we state cloth where the prince sat. Yes, okay, so there are those who follow Catholicism. He's not necessarily saying Catholicism is wrong, but he's saying it isn't necessarily correct, just it was the true years ago, right? That doesn't necessarily mean it's the true religion, okay? Just as the cloth where the prince sat yesterday, that's not the prince itself, okay? The prince could have left. It's possible. Krantz, to such brave loves, will not be enthralled, but loves her only who at Geneva is called religion. Plain, simple, sullen, young, contemptuous, yet unhandsome. As among lecherous humors, there is one that judges no wenches wholesome, but coarse country drudges. So at that's Calvin's religion, okay? That's Calvinism, Prism and such, okay? So there are some who think that's the true religion. Why? But they think it's the true one because it is so unattractive, so plain. And he's like, that's not necessarily what makes it true either. Just because it's plain and simple also doesn't make it the true one. Just as he says there are lecherous humors, meaning among people who are lecherous in type, they say, well, the only woman who is a true woman is one who's ugly because she couldn't get some other man, so she can be loyal to you. Again, he's saying that that's not the correct way either. And then there's a third type, Grias. Grias stays still at home here. And because some preachers, vile, ambitious bawds are pimps, and laws, still new like fashions, bid him think that she which dwells with us is only perfect, he embraceth her whom his godfathers will tender to him, being tender, as wards still take such wives as their guardians offer or pay values. So this third example is people who follow Anglicanism. Basically, he's some who say, well, Anglicanism is true because that's what we have. That's what we have here in England. Uh, just like there are some who they just, when they get married, they just marry whoever their godfather gets to them, right? And they're like, that must be it. I guess that's true. So it's worth pointing out at this point that Donne himself came from a recusant Catholic family. And he's writing this poem at a time when he is still Catholic, but maybe doubting his Catholic faith. He eventually became an Anglican priest. His brother one of his brothers was actually imprisoned for harboring a Catholic priest. So at this time, Catholicism was persecuted, severely persecuted in England. His brother was imprisoned for harboring a priest, and his brother contracted plague in prison and died there. Um, and that was one of the things that contributed to maybe question faith. But Donne attended Cambridge and Oxford, but he couldn't take a degree because he would not take the oath of supremacy. The oath of supremacy was basically you agreed that the monarch of England was the head of the church. And basically, it was a way of a Catholic could not in conscience agree to this. Now, obviously, there would be some who would just lie and do that, but no gentleman at the time, no self-respecting person at the time would lie like that. And so Donne could not do that. But the reason why he attended was he knew he couldn't take the degree, but it was to make the connections that he wanted to make to follow his political career. So he was aiming for a political career, and he did make the connections. But unfortunately, he fell in love with the niece of his patron. He eloped with her. He married her against her father's will, for which he was thrown in prison along with his brother and the priest who married them. But the marriage was proven to be valid. That means they didn't coerce her. So he was released, and then the priests were also released. But this was the end of his political career. So he lived for some time with his wife in poverty. So so that's just a little bit of a significant personal background about religion, because this is coming at a time when Donne himself is thinking over these things. And so he's saying, all right, so let's go back to the poem. Again, just accepting the religion that's the religion of your country, that's not religion either. There's another possibility. Careless Phrygius. So this is the character of an atheist type. Doth abhor all, because all cannot be good. As one, knowing some women whores, okay? So, no, they're all bad. All religions are bad. Some are bad, and so therefore they're all bad. So just like someone would say, well, some women are all whores. Again, he's saying that's not necessarily correct. And then there's a fifth possibility. It's an interesting one. This one is the sort of we're all one. All religions are one kind of thing. Uh, Gracchus loves all as one and thinks that so as women in diverse countries go in myths, yet are still one kind, so is religion. And this blindness too much light breeds. Okay, so there are some who think, well, religion is religion. They all have some truth to them, just as all women are women. So all religions they have some view of the truth. And he calls this blindness. This blindness too much light breeds. But unmoved, thou of force must one, and force but one allow, and the right. Okay? You have to choose one. You have to choose the correct one. You can't not choose. And then here and this is significant because so it's popular among our circles to speak of to think in terms of and that in political affairs, intellectual affairs, the normies don't matter. And that might be true, but that's true as far as political affairs go. But as far as religion goes, You have to think about this. Your soul is at stake. And normies have to be taught about this. What are they to be taught? How are they to be guided? And he's going to provide a way of perhaps guiding them. Okay. And so he goes on to say, ask thy father, which is she, let him ask his. Though truth and falsehood be near, yet truth a little elder is. Okay, that's interesting because there's a little bit of overlap with the earlier take on Catholicism because it is the older, it is the elder. So that's kind of an interesting implication of this line here. And then he goes on to say, he's not of none nor worst that seeks the best. To adore or protest may all be bad. There was a big disagreement in Protestant circles to handle things like images of the divine. There was an iconoclasm that was popular in Protestant circles. Iconoclasm meant tearing down the things that were put up in Catholic churches because it was felt that these distracted from the simplicity of faith and that they made you adore the image rather than the reality behind it. And what Donne is saying is like, well, it's bad to tear those things down. Maybe it's good. I'm not saying that one way or the other right now. It may all be bad. And then he says, doubt wisely. In strange way, to stand inquiring right is not to stray. So in a curious way, actually just try to inquire in the right way is the way, is the proper way to go. To sleep or run wrong is. To sleep, meaning not to think about these things at all, or to run wrong, to go headlong into something. That's the wrong way. And then he gives a famous image of how to think about truth. On a huge hill, cragged and steep, truth stands. And he that will reach her about must and about must go. And what the hill's suddenness resist when so. So the part about it is that you ascend by going round and round, meaning you don't just leap to the truth necessarily, but you think about things. You go over and over the same ground sometimes. You think things over and over sometimes, just as you spiral upwards when going up a hill that you can't just ascend directly. And then he's saying, you have to do this. You have to take this journey. Yet strive so that before age, death's twilight, thy soul rest. For none can work in that night. To delay, therefore now do hard deeds, body's pains, hard knowledge too, endeavors reach. And mysteries are like the sun, dazzling yet plain to all eyes. Yes, the mysteries of faith, and there are many of them. How God can be three in one, for example, are like the sun, they're dazzling yet plain to all eyes. In other words, it's dazzling, but we can all see what they are. We can see that they're there. Keep the truth which thou hast found. Men do not stand in so ill case that God hath with his hand signed kings' blank charters to kill whom they hate. This is interesting too, because now there's a take on, well, what do you do when you're persecuted for your faith? Okay, which was Donne's own case at this time. And you could say it may be the case of those who follow true religion now. Nor are they vicars, but hangmen to fate. Fool and wretch, wilt thou let thy soul be tied to man's laws, which she, meaning your soul, shall not be tried at the last day? Oh, will it then boot thee to say a Philip or a Gregory, a Harry, this? At the last day, when you have to answer for yourself, is it going to help to say, oh, but this is what they told me? That's not necessarily going to save your soul. Is not this excuse for mere contraries equally strong? Cannot both sides say so? That thou mayst rightly obey power. Okay, now, so political power, rightly obey power. No, what are the proper bounds of political power? What can political power make us believe and say those past, meaning beyond the power of the true limits of political power, her nature and name is changed. To be then humble to her is idolatry. Okay, so if, let's say, Catholicism is true and England is being Catholic, you nevertheless must remain Catholic. Now, Dunn's own father played it kind of safe, like he did as little as possible to attract political attention to himself. He was an ironmonger and somewhat wealthy, although a lot of his wealth was lost. But he protected himself by just not drawing too much attention to what he did. Uh, but he did accept, be humble. To be humble to her is idolatry. That would mean that, for example, you couldn't take the supremacy. Uh, as streams are, power is. So here's another. Those blessed flowers that dwell at the rough stream's calm head thrive and do well. So just stay close to it. The oil is best, but to give yourself roots, having left their roots, and them streams teach, alas, are driven through mills and rocks and woods, and at last consumed in going in the sea are lost. Souls, which more choose men's unjust power from God claimed than God himself to trust. So those who trust in political power find themselves ruined by it. Just as if you give up your roots and give yourself to the stream, you're just going to get blown by it. You're just going to get blown away by it. God himself trust, if you follow the image, it seemed to mean then that you hold to your roots rather than giving yourself up to the stream. Now, what that means in your individual case, well, you have to determine for yourself. It might mean, for example, in Dunn's case, it meant I'm not going to accept this oath. Although later, again, like I said earlier, he did become an Anglican. So I think that this poem provides us with a very interesting way to think about the normie. The normie is something that should be treated with a mixture of pity and contempt, but must be spoken to for the sake of their soul. And there are ways that the normie can be appealed to. There are things you can hold on to, and it's worth the effort, or at least Dunn seems to think so. Now, there's an image that you can use for the intellectual life. There is a degree to which sort of normal average person can appreciate the intellectual life, and it's through a metaphor or an image simile, such as the image of truth standing still. That's how you can reach them through poetry. Well, I hope this has been of interest, and I hope that this stream actually went through. Thank you for listening to this stream, and I'll see you all next week. Take care, everyone.